Pact is the Prison Advice and Care Trust. We're an independent national charity. We work with and for people affected by prison. So we're working inside prisons with women and men in custody. We're working to support people leaving prison to make a fresh start. And we're working with the children and the families of all those people affected by the prison system, many of whom feel themselves to be hidden victims of the justice system.
You start to hear the loudest banging in your house you've ever heard. The shock of not being aware of what's going on and being scared of not knowing what's coming. I heard my mum shout my name and tell me to hide, and in my head I thought, there's nowhere to hide, there's nowhere to go. Whoever's coming through the door, I'm going to be faced with. As I gathered those thoughts, all I heard was, it's the police, stay where you are.
In 2017, my then husband was arrested 4 days after my wedding, and I was 7.5 months pregnant at the time. He was arrested and remanded, and my whole life got turned into turmoil. I had to come to terms with what he'd done, that he was now in prison. I had to come to terms with the fact that I was now going to be a single mother. I had to go through labour by myself. Also, the media took an interest in the story, and my face and my name were also run in the press. It was really an awful time. I was trying to deal with all of that. I then heard that he was trying to kill himself in prison.
Over 250,000 children every year experience a parent being arrested, tried and taken away from their homes and put into prison.
The police are now in my house, and as I've come to my door, I've had a female officer kind of push me back into my room, asking me to put on some trousers as there's male officers coming in to search our house as they have a warrant. After doing this, I've gone downstairs to my mum. We've been put in one room together so the house can be searched, and my mum's explained the warrant to me.
From the moment of arrest through to trials, going to court, and then going through to visiting prison, it's a completely alien world to most people. It's something they've never experienced before, and for a lot of people they feel very much isolated and on their own. They don't feel like there's a lot of support or information out there. The common theme that we hear from young people who've experienced this is it comes absolutely out of nowhere. It's chaos, they have no idea what's going on. We've got an animation on our website from a young boy called Ollie who talked about that experience.
The police came barging in, I was asleep, and they threw the duvet off my bed and told me to stand up, and I was confused, I was scared, and so many thoughts were wandering through my mind. Why are they here? What are they doing here? Have I done something wrong? Has someone done something wrong? I was unsure of what was happening, and I felt scared. I was scared of the police at this time because I felt like I was being treated like an animal. They told me to get off my bed, they shoved me in a room and told me not to move off the sofa. It was like I had done something wrong.
Lots of men ran into the house shouting and said, stay on your bed, don't move, and he had no idea what was happening.
It wasn't until later that day when I returned home to find out my dad had been arrested. At this time I was still confused and I didn't know what was going on. Every part of me just blew up. I felt like there was no life left in me. I felt dead, and I was upset, and there's no words to explain how I felt. I just felt mentally sick and confused, and I just wanted to cry.
And someone came and took his dad away. And that moment is so important for young people. It can be a really alienating, really disruptive time for a young person and change the way they view the police and authority for the rest of their lives. Because all they know as a child is someone came, kicked my door in, usually at 5 a.m. or when they're in bed, and disrupted my life and took my parent away.
Look up. Prison is a really difficult place to live. People think it's a holiday camp, you know. What they forget is the emotional and psychological pain that people go through. Prison is stripping you of your identity, making you know that you are really not a worthless individual. That's what the sentence is actually designed to do. That's what the numbering is designed to do, isn't it? To strip you away from who you think you are, so that you could be reconfigured as part of the machine. It's a very lonely place. It's a very frightening place. And it is a violent place, and it is a place of power and control. And solitude. My children suffered. They were bullied, they frightened, ashamed of their parents. They were lonely, didn't have anybody to talk to, knew that it wasn't a subject you should really bring up in school, were never asked. I remember my daughter who was, my youngest daughter who was, I think she was 10 when I went to prison. She was 9 when I went to prison, and when on her 10th birthday, I remember her saying to me, I rang her up and she said to me, "Mum, what am I going to say this year at my party? Last year I said you were at work and that you could make it. What am I going to say this year?" In the end, she had to tell people, you know, my mum, I don't live with my mum, you know, my mum's left me.
There's so many feelings and emotions that come with it. Not only do you have to come to terms with what that person has done, you feel it's definitely like bereavement without a body. It just feels like, you know, I think you go through that same process. Like if someone died and you think like, oh, what if on that day if I would have asked them to come home, or if they didn't go to that place on that day, or I feel like you feel some guilt yourself, because what if you would have noticed that something was wrong, or if you would have just asked them to come home rather. I feel like you feel a lot of emotions that you wouldn't, unless you've been through it, you wouldn't really know. At the time when he first went away, it was awful. There was, you know, I had to take my children through different entrance at the school because people were talking about me in the playground. You know, you lose friends. You are going through this hidden battle that the rest of the world just isn't sympathetic to, because they see the person and the crime and where they deserve to be. And like in my case, I completely agree, that's where he deserves to be. But they don't see what the family are going through as well. The bit that was the hardest, and I don't think anyone would really think about it unless you've been through it, but it was the registering of the birth, because you go there on your own. And that was so difficult. That was so difficult. And I just got to a really, really low place, to a point where I didn't think I really wanted to keep going anymore.
Prisoners' families feel that they are really the kind of hidden victims of the crime themselves. But unlike the actual victims, they often also suffer the stigma, the prejudice, the stereotypes, and the bewildering confusion of trying to work their way through the British criminal justice system.
It's often a family member who will be able to pick up the phone and say, "I'm concerned about this, I think this is happening, I think we need to do something about this." So it's so important that we listen to them, that we don't view them as someone who's committed a crime themselves. You know, they can be an absolute asset. And we know from the Lord Farmer Review that families, we need to start seeing them as the golden thread for prison reform and rehabilitation. And it's just so important that we treat them, you know, as the assets they are and as human beings, because it really could happen to anyone.
Many families contact us to say, where is he? Where is she? They've been taken away into the justice system and they've no idea where they are. So that's the first hurdle, finding out where the person's gone. The second one is finding out how you might maintain contact, how you might keep in touch with that person, how you might visit them. And again, it's a bewildering process of, first of all, trying to find the prison, trying to find how you book a visit, trying to find out how you send in property for them, what you are and aren't allowed to take with you on a visit, what you're allowed to wear. And then you get to the prison and you have the whole experience of being searched, of often feeling that you're being treated like a criminal yourself, when all you're doing is trying to care for the person in your family.
When I was in prison, when the kids' dad would come and bring the kids to me, he definitely used to feel that he was under surveillance. And we had lots and lots of issues with the visits, about dress codes, about the dogs, the drug dog, the kids being frightened of the drug dog. We've had closed visits as a family where children sit across the table for you and you can't even touch them.
I remember a lady we worked with called Patricia, and every time she came into the group, she just wouldn't stop crying. And it turned out that she'd been trying to visit her son, but every time she visited her son, she was so distraught at the state of him that she broke down in tears. And eventually he said, "I don't want you to visit anymore." And contact was broken. The next thing she'd learned was that her son was on a suicide watch in the prison, which made her even more distraught. But she couldn't persuade her son to allow her to go and visit him. So we negotiated with the prison, with the son. We supported her. We got her into all sorts of care and support to help her cope with the situation. And eventually he agreed that she could visit again. We had our family worker in the prison at that first meeting. We reunited them. Within 3 months, he was not only off suicide watch, but he was attending courses in the prison and he was coping. And that meant she was able to cope with life on the outside as well.
Having visits with family is all about giving someone a sense of hope and a connection to the outside world. Knowing that you've got something to strive for, knowing that you get that visit, you get more visits, you get longer visits and more quality visits if you're behaving well in prison and you're engaging with the regime and with your sentence plan. That's a real incentive to do well and to better yourself.
Seeing your children, seeing your family members, it moves you away from being a number to a person again. So coming to the visits room is a moment where you suddenly emotionally connect back with your life outside of prison and gives you hope for the future, that you can come out and that it'll end one day.
A lot of the time when people come out of prison, they've lost an awful lot. They've lost their job, they've lost their home. A lot of the time they're coming out and very much starting from scratch, and it's the family who will be able to support them in putting a roof over their head, maybe even helping them to get back into employment. And just having that emotional support and connection, particularly in the first few months when things are really, really tough, having people on the outside and family to support you is so, so important.
Every time we keep a family together, it reduces the risk of reoffending by nearly 40%.
It is only your family that will love you, and it's only love that really heals the real trauma of going to prison. One day, the sun followed me, photographed me, published a story about me saying drug lag let out to work in drug rife Handsworth. I was sitting on the train. I used to go by train from Stafford to Birmingham. I was sitting on the train watching people read The Sun and look at me and just feeling absolutely scared that I would be attacked, scared that I was being judged, scared that I could never live it down and never could get away from it, and horrified as well about the way that it was portrayed, not as a success story, that I had won this privilege to work outside the prison and to rebuild my life. but that it was viewed as I was a dangerous individual who was being let out to cause damage in communities. My children have not come out of that without damage. My son went to prison whilst I was in prison. He was 18 and he had a fight at college the day before his A-levels. I went to prison. He said afterwards to me that on the day he had the fight, every single piece of anger that he'd ever felt about the fact that I was away came out in that moment. Because he was 18, he hadn't known, he suddenly was thrust into a position of responsibility and caring for his siblings, and I don't think he could cope, and it all exploded in that one episode.
After that morning, any bang or sound at home put you on edge. It would have you checking out the windows that there's no police cars outside, and it would have you checking through the peephole that there's no one standing to the sides ready to come in. These are the effects that it had on me as a young pregnant adult. Imagine what the effects it would have on a child or young people who don't understand or don't have the situation explained to them and that are none the wiser. That one morning can affect them for such a long time. That one morning can affect the relationship between police officers and young people, those young people. That one morning determines whether you are their protectors or their enemies.
It was at that point when the thoughts were becoming more and more frequent that I knew that I had to do something. I had to take something positive from this situation, otherwise it was just going to consume me. So with the agreements, I spoke to my family and I said that I really wanted to go to university and I wanted to study criminology and psychology, I think as a way to try and get some answers to questions that I knew that I was never ever going to get. And it gave my life a whole new focus. It gave me something to also aim for, and I'm achieving, and it kind of gave me my life back.
She's found through doing her criminology degree, it's helped her to understand the factors that lead to criminal behaviour, and something that she's actually found quite therapeutic. So we had a chat and she was thinking about the impact that this had on her, and she said to me, you know, I just really think this could be so good for other people. And so her idea was to start a scholarship for young people who've had a parent in prison to support them to go to university and study a degree.
Just amazing. Multi-billion-pound sports centre that the US Olympic team was based in.
So because university changed my life so much, what I'm actually currently in the process of trying to achieve is I'm trying to get a university scholarship set up for young people who have or have had a parent in prison to try and help curb intergenerational offending.
I genuinely believe that everybody in society should have the opportunity of access, because it's the right of a democracy. It trains you as a citizen to be able to fulfil your potential in society.
And I think that's why it's like the development of this scholarship and stuff is so important, because it also advertises to those that may come from deprived backgrounds that, you know, university is for you. You can access it. We're here to support you. We believe in you.
That's the key word, is support, that there is support, what's available. And that's why I'm excited about this particular bursary stroke scholarship, that if we can identify certain cohorts of students, we can make sure that support is in place from day one, and that they know about the support, what's available. So we are proactively working with those students to get them through their academic journey.
Definitely.
So that's what's key. So
that's what links in very nicely as well with the work that Pact does, because obviously Pact is also there to offer that support for prisoners' families.
Janice's experience, her son was in prison a couple of years ago, I think, and he was remanded in prison whilst awaiting trial. So he was in prison before being convicted of any crime. He served approximately a year, I believe, and he's now out, but of course the impact of that time that he spent in there has been really significant, so she still very much has to support him emotionally and practically, and it's been very, very difficult for her. But it also means, you know, having someone who volunteers on the helpline and runs the peer support group who has that direct experience is incredibly valuable. It means that she can really help other people and also be a nice, friendly listening ear who's been there herself. David got in touch with us, sent an email to our generic inbox, came over to me, and he said, you know, I'd really like to do some campaigning work with Pact. I've seen the work that you do. He's been campaigning and doing a lot of media appearances around his mum's case. So his mum is in prison for murder of his father, and he was just really keen to share his experience as having a loved one in prison. Something David shared with us is that when his mum was arrested and his father was killed, him and his brother didn't really get any support from the police, or, you know, that whole experience was like a bomb had gone off in his family, and they had a liaison officer, but otherwise he really felt like they were just left to it and there wasn't much support for them, and it was a really lonely, difficult and isolating time. So he feels very passionately about there being more specialist support for people who are in that kind of situation where a crime has happened in the family home.
Yeah, please all sit beside each other. For you guys, it was really easy for you to draw the last cell that you saw because you've seen them. These pictures are drawn by children, and this is what a child thinks that where you're taking their parents might be. So there's a child somewhere that thinks you're being held from a ceiling and being looked after by a spear. Without explaining to a child where they're going to have all this anxiety and all this worry. So all it takes is kind of that 1 minute conversation to say they are going to be kept safe.
And then what impressions do you want to leave on any child present? I mean, that's been on the forefront of your mind all the way through. I think somebody mentioned it over there about kind of, if this was my kid, how would I want them to be treated?
Well, I think what we said is it's important that the children aren't scared by us, by the police in general, and when we go in we try and make them as calm with the situation that we can. If it means we have to get down on their level, get down to their height to speak to them, to explain as best we can why we're there to help them. The whole point of the police being there is to make people safe, and that's what we want to try and do, and to get that point across in the most basic level that we can, without putting any more fear into them, really.
Police officer, but it might be one of the neighbouring, so it might be worth putting their details down rather than the actual arresting themselves.
Where can you get more of those?
So we've got a patch that we're going to hand over to Lisa. Lisa's the way we'll just read.
As somebody who has been affected by imprisonment, Pact just plays such an important role in offering that support, whether it be through our befriending service, through our helpline. We also offer a court service as well if families are struggling in the courts. It gives you such vital information that it's not accessible anywhere else. You just have to wait for him to make contact with you in that respect, I'm afraid. If you don't end up, but you've been in contact with him while he's been in Norwich prison, correct? I went along to Pact for an interview and I became a volunteer for their helpline.
So what date was your son attacked by the two officers? Did you leave your details on the Safer Custody hotline? Okay.
We get calls from anything from, I have concerns about my loved one, I'm worried that they're being bullied, or that there's an issue around self-harm, or it could be, how do I book a visit? So we do that 7 days a week. We run relationship and parenting programs in a lot of prisons across England and Wales, so that's support with family literacy, engaging with your child's early development, up to the role of play and bonding with your child, so all that kind of stuff as well.
Wherever we're allowed to by the prison service, we will employ people with real experience. So we've got people who have been in prison working as part of our team. We've got people whose children have been in prison, whose parents have been in prison, whose partners have been in prison. And those people have an incredible depth of understanding and knowledge.
I don't think there is any person better to help people going through something so traumatic than someone that has walked a similar path as well.
The people who work in the prisons, in the courts, on our helpline, in the community, we have the most amazing staff and volunteers who are heroes, really. They're unsung heroes. And we all continue to feel hugely motivated by this work, because we know if we just make a difference to one person's life, one family, when they're in that very dark place, in that very lonely place, you can help them through and you can transform their lives. And have we got the planning meeting for the parliamentary reception?
Yeah, I think it might be.
We have a big ambition over the next 5 years to recruit 1,000 citizens who we will train and equip to work in our services, to make sure every family member, every child, every woman or man leaving prison has someone there alongside them to offer them the support they need.
Pact does help because it's a specialist organisation that understands a lot of these dynamics and comes at it from a position of non-judgment. What Pact does, it can cut through all that bullshit. It has the numbers, it has the people, it knows who to call if you're worried, if you want to pass on a message to the chaplain, if something's happened in your family life and you want to let your loved one know. It knows how to cut through that bullshit, it knows how to cut through the obscurity. It's got a secret window into the world of prisons.
So many people have said to me, I don't know what I would have done without Pact. And that could be a family engagement worker, that could be a visitor centre member of staff who's just helped them use a locker and been comforting to them. It could be someone on our helpline, and that really inspires me, and it makes me get up in the morning, because I think, if we're not here, if we're not telling people about the work that we do, then so many people are going to miss out.